So this month so far, anyways, all 10 days of it, I've been sharing just some things about productivity. I prefer to use the word fruitfulness. Prefer to think of it as kind of the outflow of what's happening on the inside, as opposed to just kind of getting a bunch of stuff done. And but I was inspired, stroke provoked, made to think about things by something a friend of mine posted in a Facebook group that we're part of, and we were talking about productivity and. This friend of mine very honestly shared that he is seeking to address some of the hindrances to his productivity, physical clutter, and inefficient workflow. For example, how he records and collates his ideas, etc., and just kind of clutter digitally, clutter physically. And in that, it makes it difficult for him to kind of get on with some of the projects that he's got in his heart, because there's actually a job to do before you do the job. And I think that sometimes we can all fall into that kind of trap where we don't have things organized in a way that make it easy for us to act. And ease of action, removing the friction, can make such a huge difference as to how easily and how much we can produce. And but what was so vulnerable about what he shared was that he said it all seems quite easy. When you just think, okay, I just need to organize my thoughts, I just need to organize my physical space, easy, just do it. But he said all this is quite easy to solve. But in one sense, it brings up emotional pain, a bit like the hoarders that you see on some of these TV programs. That physical clutter is certainly a big deal, but emotional and mental clutter can be even more so. And I just thought it was so insightful that my brother recognized that many of our actions and habits, both good and bad, but often in a negative sense, have emotional hooks and roots that need to be dealt with if we ever hope to deal with the outward circumstances and the outward way that we are working. Certainly, if we want to change that on a long-term basis. And so, I was just thinking about this, although change may look very easy from the outside, sometimes we can look, say, at someone else's life. And I'm sure, like, I'm in a number of groups where I in the same way as my brother did here, make myself quite vulnerable. And I'm sure some people are kind of like, oh man, just do it. Just change your way of thinking, or just change the way you see yourself, or just change the way you're doing that. And that's very easy to say, and it can look easy from the outside, but actually changing takes real courage, I think. And in thinking about this, I thought, whatever we're doing, whatever we're involved in, there is almost always an easier way to do it. And scalability is hindered by complexity. Productivity and production is hindered by things being too complicated. The more complex a system, the harder it is to sustain and to scale. And looking for ways to simplify what we do, both in our personal and professional lives, is time well spent, I think. I think because the payoff is something that blossoms over time. If we can find a way to shave 10 minutes or $10 from a regular activity, 365 days later, we've harnessed 3,650 minutes. That's 60 hours. We've reclaimed a week. of working time in our life that can be better spent doing something else. And we've saved $3,650 that we can either treat ourselves to something special or invest in other activities. The compound effect of small savings has been well documented. And these small savings can make a huge difference when they stack up over time. And I think time is the most especially precious thing that we have. And I actually like to think of time in a different way. Sometimes we can think of time in such an abstract way, but time is life. Your time, what you spend your time on, you are spending your life on. You trade life for whatever return you get from that transaction. Like we exchange and invest life for life when we pour thought and care into our marriage and children. We exchange our life energy when we trade our minutes for money. It's sometimes we call that work. We swap life for a payoff, whether that's for a personal dividend or a professional one. We are exchanging our life for whatever we get in return. Time can only be spent. You're not going to get a refund. And, and it just made me think about how important it is, therefore, for us to look for areas in our ecosystem, the kingdom that we're building, the life that we're living, and look for places where time is leaking unnecessarily through the cracks. How can we better do something so we can reclaim those precious minutes and with it potentially reclaim precious money? Do you know what I mean? So it has been said that time is money, but I think time is far more than that, to be honest. I think there's far more precious things that time is pregnant with than just extra income. But we will have both and, not either or. And we are, as human beings, we are hardwired to avoid pain more than we are inclined to pursue pleasure. We generally will act more aggressively in the best sense of the word to avoid pain than we will to pursue some goal or some vision or some dream that we carry in our heart. And having a great vision and dreaming big and all of that can be really helpful, but rightly framing what is true right now sometimes is even more essential, because when we realize that it's the short minutes of a finite life that we are trading for whatever payoff we gain in exchange, it begins to color every transaction that we make. What are your spending habits? And I'm not talking about dollars, I'm talking about minutes, hours, days, weeks, and sometimes years and decades. What are you pouring those into? And when we begin to think of it like that, we realize that actually sometimes the pain of staying the same, when we begin to frame things in that way, the pain of staying the same is far greater than the pain of change, and that is a prompt to move courageously toward a different way of living, a different way of doing. If we think of it, and I'm like a gadget guy. I love gadgets, yeah. And I'm sure, most of us love to shop at some level, but when we think this object that I'm purchasing didn't, we could say, oh, well, it cost me, £60, or it cost me $100 or £20 or whatever. But really, it's what it's costing you is the amount of life you spend to earn that money. There's always an exchange going on. And when we think like this object that I'm purchasing cost me 2 days of life. You know, this shiny object I'm putting my money on the table for cost me 3 weeks of life. That project that I'm postponing whilst I scroll my news feed so far has cost me 16 hours of life. And, I wrote a blog post this morning, and then I'm spending some time kind of sharing some thoughts around this. And I could say, okay, well, the article that I wrote cost me 34 minutes of life. And I'm privileged and happy to spend those 34 minutes with you. And then there's like the bonus drops that on top of that to post it, to format it, to send it so people could actually consume it and read it and benefit from it. And then there's the time I'm taking to stand here in my office on an unfortunately very rainy day here in Burgess Hill, and to share my thoughts with whoever chooses to engage with them. I'm choosing to spend my life doing what I'm doing right now because I see benefit in it. I consider it a privilege and like I feel very blessed to be in a position to spend my time this way and share things that I believe can be helpful and beneficial with other people, like and like leveraging technology is certainly one way in which we can reclaim time and we can really multiply our effectiveness and multiply our reach and multiply our ability to benefit other people. There are lots of ways that we can begin to leverage different technologies in order to do that. And so I just encourage you to today, when we're thinking around the subject of productivity and fruitfulness, to just take some time to consider how you are spending your time. What are your spending habits, and how could you better improve those spending habits to be more fruitful and ultimately in that be more fulfilled?